Gwegwe Ganawageronu, Lancelot Yujuts. Welcome to our town for Regan Jacobs. For today, we are very pleased to have members of the FNEA working group here today.
I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad to be, able to give the community an update on the, important things we've been working on. In case people don't know who I am, I'm Deidre Deom, and I'm the Combined School Committee representative. I hold a general seat, and I've been, asked to sit on the First Nation Education Act working group. And this is another member of the working group.
Good morning. Thank you for having us on. My name is Winona Polson-Lahache. I work with the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. I'm a project leader in the Office of the Council of Chiefs, and one of the files that I'm working on is education. And it's been a very interesting experience having been on the working group. It's been very fast-paced, and I'm excited that we're here to give an update today.
I think that's key, actually, within what we've been talking about since this working group came together, is that you guys are really truly a working group. You guys are bringing both sides of your experience from the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake, from the Education Center, and you guys are really working. That's good to see. It proves that people can work together if there's an important subject, especially in education. Speaking of education, where are we now with after Harper and Sean Atleo appeared together and discussing about the FNEA?
Well, I can give a brief update on where things are at. Before I do that, I'll just give some, for any community members that might not have all of the information on the announcement, just give a brief update on that. The announcement had occurred on February 7th, and the announcement included, I think, the most significant piece of it was that it had included an announcement and a commitment of funding. They're looking at $1.9 billion in funding. They broke that into three different segments. One segment is on infrastructure and improving the infrastructure of schools in communities. Another component is on implementation funding for the Education Act itself. And the third part is for core funding for schools. The core funding for schools, they've talked about, there's this idea of, since I believe it's either 1992 or 1996, there's been a cap on funding for communities. So communities that are growing, that have a growing population, can't receive any more than 2% of what their base funding is. They've I guess generously, as as they've indicated, increased that cap to 4% as an escalator, what they're calling an escalator clause. Unfortunately, though, what we're sort of seeing in some of the analysis there's actually a really interesting analysis that was done by a legal organization, and they talk about whether or not it's actually even going to be adequate. They talk about how the AFN for years had been pushing for at least 6% as an escalator clause, and here we are agreeing to 4%. So that's sort of a breakdown of what's there. In the announcement, they also referenced some pieces that are sort of requirements of what the new act is going to include, and in that, they actually talk about pieces that we recognize from the First Nations Education Act. So when they made the announcement of this new act, which is the First Nations Control of First Nations Education Act, long title, they sort of hinted that it was different than the First Nations Education Act, but the pieces that we're seeing in there are really essentially the same. The pieces that we disagreed with from the beginning, things like not respecting our right to self-determination and control over education is still being disregarded. There's still this sort of idea of Indian Affairs having a real involved role in the way that the act would be implemented. There's still the whole issue of standards and certification that's in there, and who determines what those standards and certification is. Sort of the government imposing those on communities. So we're recognizing a lot of pieces from the Education Act that are still in there. The Mohawk Council had responded with a position, and the Education Center also responded with a position within 2 to 3 days, I think, of the announcement. Both positions had indicated that our positions are still maintained. The Kahnawake position that was adopted in December is maintained, and it's going to be upheld. So the community itself is still opposed to the actual legislation, even the name change.
I'd like to jump in on what she was talking about finance. Something that's really important. Like she's saying, what they're offering to begin with may not even, become close to what we need. But something people have to understand is, it seems more like the whole press media blitz, the Leo Harper, was more of a propaganda tool, because one thing when you look at the overall financial picture is another element that they didn't change is that they're still not including post-secondary education, preschool education, kindergarten education, and that's a huge budget. So if you look at how much right now the federal government spends, if you take out the all of those post-secondary and the preschool education, the budget is cut down dramatically. So even with how much they're claiming to re-inject, the government is still in a major billion-dollar cost-saving position because they've cut the other programs. But they don't explain it that way. They make it sound like you're getting more, when in fact the way that it appears is we're getting far less. So how the media is able and the government's able to spin that, where everyday people are saying, well, isn't that what we wanted? We wanted more money. Right. So, again, with what Winona's saying, our position is really to stand firmly that it's still the same act. It was a PR stunt. Yeah. It was a PR stunt to make Canadians think that Canada was doing something wonderful for the Native people.
From my understanding is that I don't think the Harper government, or even quite possibly even members of the AFN, thought that there was going to be educated First Nations people who could actually read through this whole proposed act. One of the things that I find curious, though, is a lot of Kahnawake who are students had said, this sounds like this is the way to go, meaning that the act itself looks like it's comparable to, and maybe even a little bit more in terms of the education process, equal to Joe Canadian who's going to school outside of reserve.
Well, I'm very glad that you brought that up. Something you have to understand, we have talked about it in the past, is that we are receiving less funding from the federal government, so it's hard to compete. But as we go through our presentation today and we talk about the work that Kahnawake is doing in terms of developing a portrait of a Kahnawake education system, and what we're doing at the First Nations Education Council table is really some great work. And we're looking at our education systems ourselves. And one good thing that maybe the FNEA has done is it has encouraged us to do this self-reflection. And the key is we have to be the ones to change our education system or make it be what we want it to be. And if people feel that there's not adequate culture or not adequate math, if there are things that we need to look at, that's really our responsibility, not Canada's. And to assure as a combined school committee member, I've been on about 9 months now. And it is my mission and the mission of the table, really, we're working very strong to go forward to make sure that our programs are strengthened and will not only integrate culture, but will make sure that in the core areas, core competencies of math and English and science, that we will not accept anything except the best of what we can be, and we're willing to put the work in to have that. So people don't need to feel like maybe it's good Canada comes in and makes our education center be what we think it needs to be. They need to really have confidence that we can do it.
Right. On that note, we are definitely going to be taking a small little break. We're talking about the FNEA working group and the all the components that are going there. What's our next step? That's coming up.
This program has been brought to you by Get and Go, a proud sponsor of Mohawk TV programming.
Welcome back to our town. For Regan Jacobs, I'm Lance Delisle. We're talking to members of the First Nations Education Act Working Group. There was a meeting that was held in Wendake, part of the FNEC organization. What happened at the meeting? Because I'm sure there's a couple of updates from there.
We had a lot of fun.
This is good.
No, I have to throw that in there. I have to say that, you know, working on this, the upside has been that our working group and the networks that we've been building have been so tremendous to meet so many strong Indigenous peoples, not only from here, but networking outside. You know, the meeting I felt when I got home was really empowering, and it made me feel so good and hopeful, because the strength at the table was really what I had hoped for. And it was very nice to know not only are we here in Kahnawake fighting, but we have allies and we have brothers and sisters. And I actually even brought my kids. I wanted them to see the meeting and to see, you know, how we are coming together as a people to stand for something like our rights and our jurisdiction. But you know, very important, maybe Winona can go through. We had started with 7 points, like kind of a governance structure to say what is it we want for our education systems. And I have to say that every file was thorough. Every 7 points covered so many good things. And Kahnawake, you know, we kind of were able to integrate the things that we felt weren't in those 7 points. So maybe Winona could talk a bit about the 7 points and what Kahnawake had to contribute and where we're going to go from there together.
Sure. There was quite a bit of content that we went through in the last 2 days. We just returned last night, and I'll try and narrow it down. It's quite a bit of information, but just to give some context to it. What we were there for was this governance project that's being developed by the First Nations Education Council. And what the governance project is it's the designing of a governance model for education, and it's being developed in hopes of being an alternative to legislation. So the FNEC looked at developing this piece. I think it was in June of last year, and since then has been working with several working groups with members from different communities. I believe we've had members from Kahnawake represented on all of the working groups, and the 7 sort of components that Deidre had identified are all pieces of what makes a governance model in education for communities. So part of it is sort of like the governing structure. Another piece of it is how you manage your human resources, recruiting, retention, accreditation, all of that sort of end of it. How you manage the information technology resources, the information in your community. We had talked a little bit about research and curriculum development. So there's all of these components, parental involvement, which was a key piece. And so all of these components all fit together to form a governance model. And the idea is to develop this model and make it a resource that communities can use to improve governance in education. So we spent the majority of our time focusing on that, building that model as an alternative, and hopefully this is, I mean, one of our options in how we're going to try and respond to the federal legislation. But we also spent a little bit of time talking and getting an update on what the FNEC is doing as well. One of the things that they're doing is the legal action. They've requested for a judicial review, and they gave us a little bit of an update on what has been occurring at the AFN in terms of how they reached this agreement and just details like that.
To me, it sounds like the 7 points is exactly what Ganawage has been doing ever since.
You're absolutely right. That's where Ganawage is. I was very happy to see that a lot of what they're proposing is what we're already doing. But part of the, the very good part of the meeting, the part that made me feel happy, was that we talked about how we have to look at education through the eyes as an Ongwehongwe person in a holistic way, not just throw the word around, but
Because holistic is definitely used a lot of times.
we use the word a lot, but what we started to identify is that as, the leaders, the teachers, the governing, the people involved in governance, that we have to bring that word to life, that it can't just be something that's thrown around. And we identified our own colonialism and how, that's affected how we view the world, and that we have to step back and say, what actually are our ways? What is holistic for Ongwehongwe people? And we ended up bringing culture and language, and what we had talked about was thinking Ongwehongwe, and we identified that as a separate issue from language, as, having a separate mindset. So that was a big discussion at the table, and it was a very passionate kind of discussion where people felt happy that we had that dialogue. And what we've agreed to do is have an additional meeting. And Ganawage has opened the door to invite all of the First Nations Education Council to come here. And what we're going to do is look at the document through eyes of Ongwehongwe people to say, have we missed anything? Did we do everything that we wanted to do? And that's really exciting to kind of go off into a fresh direction and to have everybody embrace that. Now, you had said it was very much like Ganawage, the 7 points. And this is something we're also looking at. We're looking at creating what we're calling the portrait of a Ganawage education. We're taking what we have and documenting it. What we'd like to do is put together a kind of a binder even to show what is it that we offer right now, and to also take some time to say, what are the areas that we'd like to improve? Where can we be better? And look through everything from A to Z. It's not going to be extensive at this time, because we are making sure that we have this ready to use in the battle against the Canadian government, to say we have what we need. We're aware of our issues, and we have the forward thinking to deliver the best education for Ganawage. And just so the community is aware, we're going to develop this portrait right now in the short term. We've hired Donna Goodleaf, who is a very exciting member addition to the working group. And, we're going to focus on battling the FNEA right now. But I want to assure the community, as a combined member, that we are also looking at going into a strategic planning process. And we're looking at going into a 5-year planning process where we're going to listen, and we're going to be coming out to the community, to the parents, and saying, are we meeting your needs? Where do we need to be stronger? Where are you happy? So we're very interested in hearing from the community members. So it's kind of like we have 2 phases. We're going to create a portrait right now as part of the FNEA working group that's going to help us fight Canada. And then for ourselves, we're going to have an inclusionary process with the community. So we're really moving in a very exciting and a very forward way that I think will benefit everyone in the community. And for people who think maybe the FNEA is a good thing. Again, I have to say, we're coming down to jurisdiction, which for a lot of people is not something they think about. You know, people have this idea, I'm not political. I just live in my own world, and this comes back to maybe colonialized thinking to say, have we been, you know, influenced by the outside government to compartmentalize our lives, to separate politics and separate health and separate education, and we are living in separate boxes when we need to come back and be thinking whole.
I think that's an important part, and I think that's going to be probably one of the integral parts of when you guys do have that meeting where you can get different opinions from different Ungwehue. We're going to talk about more about the inner workings of what's happening with the FNEA, the working group, and so much more on Our Town. Stay right here, please.
This program has been brought to you by Get and Go, a proud sponsor of Mohawk TV programming.
Welcome back to Our Town. For Regan Jacobs, I'm Lance Delisle. We're talking with members of the FNEA working group, and one of the questions I want to ask from as a council representative, when the announcement came with Stephen Harper and Sean Atleo, there was no surprise from the position of Stephen Harper, but there seemed to be a little bit of a surprise from the position of Sean Atleo. What's the response from the Mohawk Council of Ganawage?
Well, in order to understand the response, I think you really have to understand what sort of led up to that announcement, right? I think it was in early February we had started to hear rumblings of the announcement coming down. I believe it was 2 days before the announcement. An email to the AFN executive had been forwarded out, and we received a copy, and it basically said that an announcement was coming, and it was asking AFN executive committee members to, which are the regional chiefs across the country, to whether or not they wanted to participate or attend the announcement. The chiefs sort of at that point started to really take a look and try to figure out and collect more information. At that point, they had found out that there was a meeting on January 28th or 27th, I believe, that was held between the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, which is Bernard Valcourt, and the AFN National Chief, Sean Atleo, who was also accompanied by 3 chiefs, the Chief Morley Gugu, who's the regional chief for Atlantic region, and 2 chiefs who were the movers and seconders of a resolution from the AFN on the Education Act. So they had met with the minister on January 27th. On February 4th, the AFN has a Chiefs Committee on Education, and there's representation on this committee from across the country. The representatives had attended. Morley Gugu had actually attended that session, and he was pressed for he had been pressed with questions. There were community representatives who wanted to know what happened at the meeting, were there outcomes. They weren't informed of anything at that point. The council here had found out about that. They had also found out that the regional chief for Quebec, which is Ghislain Picard, was completely unaware. The AFN executive was completely unaware. So I mean, I think everyone was side blinded in this really swift move, if you look at it.
Has there been a response from the council office in regards to this?
Yes, there has. That is actually, all of this has led to a response. The council has issued a letter directly to the AFN national chief. The letter basically informs the AFN and puts them on notice that Ganawage is not represented in the decision that they had made and the agreement that they entered into. Ganawage any sort of legislation requires the free, prior, and informed consent of a First Nation, and Ganawage was not. It did not meet that requirement for Ganawage. So Ganawage places them on notice for that and asks them to send back a letter to say that they have a shared understanding of that. That's a good first step for protecting ourselves and ensuring that it's not misunderstood that we're represented in that agreement, right? Now, the focus really at our end, I think, needs to turn to what are the next steps then? What else, what other actions do we take
Great
to try
question.
and protect ourselves?
Great
And,
question.
Yeah.
Because I think that's basically what a lot of Ganawage want to know exactly. What is the next step of the working group?
Well, first, I have to say I've been consistently very happy with the position that the Mohawk Council has taken, and the letter, I've seen it myself. It's a 3-page letter, very strong, because myself, I sat there and I was saying, I'm not actually part of the band council electorate. I'm a traditional person, but right now, this war is being waged within the band council system, and when Sean Atleo released that announcement and I realized what he was doing, as a community member, I felt very disheartened because I thought, I've worked so hard. We've all been working so hard to fight this, and here the national chief pulls the carpet out from under us. And Winona and I were chatting, and I said, we do have a voice through the AFN representative here in Ganawage, and she agreed. And we said, well, if nobody else stands up and says, hey, it wasn't okay what you did, at least Ganawage should. So I'm very glad that the Mohawk Council took that unilateral initiative to say what you did wasn't okay, and it's not okay with us. So next steps, the working group, we ended up having a meeting last week, and we said, we have to. We created a work plan at the beginning of this in the fall, and we've been on track, that work plan, in terms of what we were hoping to accomplish, start by educating people, and we had a protest. We've been trying to heighten awareness, and we feel that there's a very strong awareness, understanding, and support of the work that we're doing here in the community, but now it's time to branch out of Ganawage. Right. And by, like I had said, Donna Goodleaf coming on board brings a wealth of kind of passion to look at the international forum to say, well, Canada is doing this to us, but we have we have inherent rights. And I think that's kind of the direction we're going into now. And we're also saying, well, the Atleo-Harper statement that went out was really, made everyday Canadians think, wow, Harper's a great guy. And our words have not gotten out there. So something that we've been, we brought up at the FNEC, we're going to bring up again at the next meeting that we host here, is that we are going to push very hard now to lobby to see if the AFNQL, the AFN, and the FNEC will take communications, developing our messages of what has happened to us as people in the history of Canada, and how is it connected to this education and the efforts of genocide and termination and cutting our funding, oppression, colonialization, to say and root it back to why are Indigenous peoples opposed to the FNEA? And right now the message is like, oh, we're trying to put standards in and they don't want them. We just want to give them more money. We don't know why they're not happy.
That seems to be the presentation from the Harper government, including the AFN.
Yes, and now we have to step up to the plate and have our voice heard. Right. And we have to say, we're not opposed to regulation. We're not opposed to standards, but they have to come from us. And cite the reasons why. And for everyday people sitting at home right now, you're saying, okay, well, what's my role? What can I do? I think the door is always still open to call the Ganawage education system. If there's anything, any projects, any initiatives that people want to do, the door's still open. If you want to make a banner, if you want to make stickers, if you want to follow through with a project, to assert our rights, then people are really encouraged to do that. As we consistently say, we are not like we're workers for the community, but it's not all on us. The community have to feel empowered to go out and take initiatives. If you're part of an organization, to take an initiative and understand that if this passes in education, it could pass in health, in social service. This will become the formula, and really the bottom line is it's to save money for the government. And something that a constitutional lawyer from the FNEC had said to us is the Indian Act is silent right now on education. But what the FNEA does is it gives the Canadian government power that they didn't actually have before. So it's a continued oppression. So pages like we have a community member has a Facebook page. There's two of them, I believe. One is Ganawage opposes the First Nations Education Act, FNEA. Hopefully we can have that put up on the screen so people can visit it, join it, like it. We put a lot of information on there and links to other organizations. Also, the Ganawage Education website is always full of information if people would like to have. And the Mohawk Council always has their press releases on site. So I think that, yes, we are continuing to fight, but we do need people in our community to feel empowered. I was reading a book on residential schools, and there was one section where the woman said I was 6 years old and every day I was beaten when I would wet my bed, but I was so small and I couldn't stop it. And she said it was so painful and I wanted to cry out, and every day I would cry. And she said the other girls would tell me, be silent, don't say anything, don't show emotion, take it, and there's nothing you can do, just move forward. I'm afraid that sometimes that mindset sometimes is within our people, that feeling of be silent and don't make a fuss. But you have to be aware that that way of thinking has been imposed on us, and that we have a right to have a voice, to demand to be treated with respect and fairness. And our people have a right to be who we are. After all, we are the original people of this continent, and we have a right to be treated with dignity and respect and to be who we were always meant to be. And even if this legislation or any legislation goes through, I hope that people begin to look at themselves and where we are as a community and say, no matter what the Canadian government imposes, to take that responsibility to learn more of who we are, what are our rights, and what are the responsibilities to protect those rights that go along with it. So I'd like to thank you for having us here today, and I hope that there is an interest that's planted in community members and in parents and in families.
Well, I think more of this interaction, this more discussion, this more community input is certainly the best way to go. It's the best route because we worked very well with communicating in such a fashion where we're able to lay out all the words out properly, and this is a great medium to do it. And thank you so much for the both of you guys for showing up today.
And for all community members, I'm a combined school committee general rep, and what that means really is my door's open to anybody. If anybody has questions about anything to do with education, suggestions, feel free to ask me questions. Find me, stop me on the road. I'm open to hear what people have to say.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank both of you for coming in today, Deidre Deom and Winona Polson-Lahache from the working group. Thank you so much for being a part of our town for today. You can always contact us at ganawage411.com or email us at mohawktv@hotmail.com as well. Yawagoa for Regan Jacobs, I'm Lance Delisle. Have yourself a good day. Wanagiwai.
Kanya ke haga thadi adraste kayerniga hiadu zewaderoru.
program has been brought to you by Get and Go, a proud sponsor of Mohawk TV programming. This program has been brought to you by Get and Go, a proud sponsor of Mohawk TV programming.